checking us out for a minute, you just haven't gotten around to hitting subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or like if you're watching on Facebook, please do that right now. I really appreciate you for that. Thank you so much. And we are right here every week doing what we do, which is bringing you the health information that you need to make the decisions that are right for you, for your family, and your community. But we do it based on evidence and fact and science. We're not here with a whole lot of speculation and, oh, yeah, I saw this and I saw that. We are here to bring you really things that you can rely on for your health information. So we're here also so that you can ask questions. So I would really love if you remember to put those questions in the chat. And now, I can't do this by myself. I have two incredible co-hosts who are joining me right now. Come on out. Mr. Wayne Bruce and Miss Bria Good. How are y'all doing?
Good.
Dr. Mel, we had some technical difficulties. Somebody was breathing all up in the
well, we gotta breathe. I mean, breath is important for life.
I mean,
maybe they were meditating.
All the people heard was breathing.
Was it you?
It must have been you. It was. I mean, it's probably the intern that we have.
It was probably the intern. There you go.
That's incredible.
We always blame it on that poor little intern.
Where can we have it? We need interns, man. So if you out there in Radio Land, Streamland, come on, be an intern with the Dr. Mel Show.
Hey,
can I say that, Dr. Mel? Can I say that?
But apparently they can't breathe. If
they cannot
as long
breathe
as you don't
on camera.
breathe.
I'm firing the one tonight, man.
Just hold your breath.
This is ridiculous.
Apparently.
So all y'all who heard nothing but breathing, kind of forget that.
All right.
Dynamic show tonight.
It is going to be an incredible show tonight. We're going to talk about infertility. I mean, that's not something that people talk about a whole lot, but turns out that 1 in 7 women have a problem carrying a pregnancy or getting pregnant during their reproductive years. And, a lot of people say, well, that's not an issue for Black people.
Mm-hmm. You thought wrong.
Right. Because we're going to break that down tonight.
And then,
we have
them men never want to talk about infertility. Every man I know is like, yeah, I'm ready.
Right.
Well, it ain't me. It ain't me. It might be though.
Exactly. Right. And then, we have these stereotypes out there about us as Black people, the welfare mom with 5 kids, or the mandingo male fathering a bunch of kids by more than one woman. I mean, these are the stereotypes that are out there about us. And so on top of all that, and, the stigma around talking about it, people just aren't getting it addressed when it happens to them. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why women of color actually are higher risk for infertility. And we have an incredible guest, a clinical clinical embryologist. I don't know why I couldn't get that out.
I don't have a whole lot to say, though.
Right.
That's a lot to say.
Well, we're going to find out what that is from him. That's the first question we're going to start off with. And then we're going to go into what is up with fertility in the Black community and in communities of color, because it's actually not just limited to the Black community. So make sure you all start sharing it now. It's going to be a great show.
Share.
Yeah,
please share.
Definitely.
Share. I make Dr. Mel mad sometimes when I say, but look, share, because we're on at a new time right now.
Right, so exactly. 8
our normal
p.m.
family hasn't grasped this new time slot, so make sure you grasp it. All right.
So, is it time to get into the weekly highlights?
Let's go. Let's go to the recap. There we go.
Let's do it.
There we go. So, Dr. Mel, I mean, we've been cruising along since July with COVID. We've been cruising. Yeah. And for the first time since July, we've had an increase. Talk to us about that.
Well, it was just a slight increase. But
we know that with fall starting and with these new variants, BQ1, BQ11, XBB that we're keeping an eye on, this isn't good, this little uptick that we saw, because it's actually translating also to a slight uptick in hospitalizations, which we see among 70-year-olds. So we know winter's coming. We know that this surge is going to be inevitable. We just don't know how much it's going to be. We talked before about, being ready, having a COVID prep plan for the holidays, eating your full spectrum of fruits and veggies, getting your vitamin D level checked and addressed with your doctor, wearing your mask indoors, and of course, getting boosted with the COVID booster, getting vaccinated if you haven't yet gotten vaccinated. But I also want to mention too, what do you do if you get COVID? Right? Because people might have forgotten. So stay isolated for 10 days unless you have no symptoms. That's 0 symptoms. Runny nose is a symptom. I've seen plenty of people say, oh yeah, well, I ain't got no symptoms, and their nose is just like running. So if you have no symptoms, the CDC does say that you can come off isolation on day 6, but you still have to wear a mask for the full 10 days. However, my advice is, before you come off isolation, please, please, please test yourself with a home test. 1 in 3 people are still positive at day 6. You might be one of those 1 in 3 people. So that means you're still contagious if you test positive with that home test. So do that. And then if you have underlying health conditions,
what are those, Dr. Mel? What are the underlying health conditions?
Diabetes, COPD, any heart condition, any lung condition, any autoimmune disease like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, any of those any of the autoimmune diseases, cancer, especially if you're under active treatment. All those are underlying health conditions. And of course, the big one, the most important one, is obesity. So if you have any of those and you get COVID, immediately when you find out, check with your doctor about getting treated with Paxlovid. And if you don't have a doctor, go to an urgent care, because that might make the difference between, you're having a mild case and not going to the hospital.
We got all these variants. We got variant ABC, variant 1, 2, 3. Like, y'all just need to go get vaccinated at this point.
Triple XYB.
Exactly. And the new one, the bivalent booster, actually covers, all those new variants are all related to Omicron. So it does provide more protection against the new variants that are coming down the pike.
Wow, that's cool. Thanks, Dr. Mel.
Thank you. And get vaccinated. We say it every week, and it's not going to stop. Get vaccinated. So vitamin D for life. We've talked a little bit about vitamin D. So what's the new information? What's the new deal with vitamin D?
Yeah, so this new study just came out. We've known a lot about vitamin D being linked to, low vitamin D levels being associated with a whole bunch of chronic diseases, a lot of the ones that I just named. But it now shows that there is a relationship between vitamin D and all-cause mortality. What does that mean? It just means death from any reason. So it shows that people with low vitamin D levels below 25 were at higher risk of dying. The risk was the lowest for dying among people whose vitamin D was in the range of 50 to 75. And above 75, there was no additional advantage. And that risk was serious. I mean, it was substantial. It's 36% higher if you have a low vitamin D level.
Wow.
And now we know people with darker skin are at risk for low vitamin D because the melanin actually blocks the sun's rays from activating vitamin D in our body. So that's important.
Wait a minute. So that's us. That's us, right? All the darker folk, all the Black people, all the people of color. So how do we help that? Like, how do we prevent any of these issues?
So there are 3 ways. One is you can just get out in the sun every day for at least 20 minutes, but that's probably not feasible for everybody.
Mhm.
So you can eat vitamin D rich foods like fatty fish, or you can take a supplement. Now, if you choose to take a supplement, it's really important, actually, for anybody, really, to get your vitamin D level checked by your doctor so that you can make sure that you're in that 50 to 75 range, whatever you're doing. And if you're taking a supplement, you don't have to like take those massive doses. Just do it daily until your vitamin D level builds up to where it's supposed to be, 50 to
That's
75.
good. That's really good to know. So vitamin D for
Vitamin
life.
D.
Yep.
That's a good thing. But before we go to the next thing, this next one is for all my people in DC.
Little go-go break, okay?
It's a go-go break. Hey, Dr. Mel, tell us what's up? This is like one of my favorite old school songs. If you old school, you gotta know about this. You gotta say.
Okay, no lie, they're saying sardines and pork and beans. I thought they were saying all these years, party that funky beat. I'm just
I thought
saying.
so
I'm not
too.
from DC. Not from DC.
You're
I'm
not
just
from
saying.
DC. You're not from DC. You gotta give up them shoulders though. I see you, Dr. Ragland. Anyway, so look. So what's the deal with sardines and pork and beans?
Okay, well, it turns out that sardines, but not pork and beans, are great brain food. Okay.
Mm.
And that is because sardines have more omega-3 fatty acids, which are really great for your brain. And it's true actually of all cold water fish. So fatty fish. So salmon, mackerel, tuna, herring, trout, find your favorite fish and eat it. Now, if you're a vegetarian though, or a vegan, you can get the same omega-3 fatty acids from nuts and seeds or from their oils like flaxseed, uh, um, chia seeds, walnuts, and their related oils, right?
Mhm.
And then there are also omega-3 dietary supplements that you can get from fish oil, cod liver oil, everybody's favorite, krill oil. You see the commercials on TV, but it really is better to get it from your diet.
Okay.
And then there was this study that was done that I thought was really neat. They showed that people with higher omega-3 levels had larger brains, specifically in the area that is related to memory.
Mm.
Wow.
And they performed better on brain tests.
Mm.
So it's better to get started in early to midlife, because by midlife, people who go on to have cognitive decline or the
Right.
early memory issues, that midlife is when the changes start. So you want to make sure that you're getting your omega-3s, especially in that phase of life.
Okay. So it just wasn't a song.
Well, the
It
sardines
just
part is the relevant part. Yes.
this wasn't a song by Junkyard.
Right.
It had a little relevance.
Well,
So moving on, right? So we've talked about all the things you have to do to live a wonderful life, right? And a healthy life. But what's it about now about having a purpose-driven life? Does that really make us live longer?
It does, it turns out. People who have a sense of purpose, it turns out in this one study, it showed that they stayed stronger, physically stronger as they aged. So
Mhm.
one way to assess that is to look at somebody's walking speed, how fast they walk, and their grip strength, how strong they can grip something. So in this Harvard study, it showed that people who have a sense of a higher purpose to their life were more likely to walk faster as they aged and have a stronger grip strength. And other studies have shown the same thing, actually. Being purpose driven matches with lower rates of not being disabled, right? Of stroke, of heart disease, and of other chronic diseases. So it's just that body, mind, spirit, right? It's all related.
Mhm. So we gotta eat healthy. We gotta work out. We gotta find a purpose. What's next? Because I feel like there's something else.
Well, actually, you don't have to work out. We've talked about the fact that you can, I mean, you working out is great, but just staying physically active, that's the key. Stay physically active and mentally active. Because I think when you have purpose, you're mentally active, right?
That's true.
Because
Then
don't
you
use it
walk
to lose
faster
it.
and grip stronger.
There you go.
There you have it. And there you have it.
You got the key.
So you know what that brings us to, Dr. Mel.
Do tell.
It is
the weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
Okay, so I got a message from Tina Twitter fingers today. She called and texted me. So I'm going to tell y'all exactly how she said it to me when she called me. She said, I'm not worried about my baby with all these children getting sick with these viruses because my baby got her shots. That's exactly how she said it to me. But something don't seem right about that.
Is she about 80 with a baby? Because you sound like you was about 80 years old.
Maybe she meant her baby,
about
her grandbaby.
Is that what she might be worried about her grandbaby? Anyway, I would say, I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Mel, is that true?
All right. Well, you know, I'm thinking, no, it's not true. I'm thinking that perhaps Tina is referring to the fact that there's a nationwide increase in respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, among children under 2 years old. Hospitals are getting it's actually among all ages, but the ones getting hospitalized are the ones under 2. Hospitals are getting overwhelmed with the number of kids coming in. And in some places, they're even running out of supplies. Wow. Let me just say, though, shout out to Tina for having her children vaccinated. That's beautiful. But there are some things that vaccines don't protect against. And one of them is RSV. RSV causes a common cold in folks our age, right? And it widely circulates in the winter. But in the little ones, it can have, really devastating effects on their breathing, which is why they end up getting hospitalized. Precautions: good hand washing with soap, water for 20 minutes, for 20 seconds, just like for COVID. Cover your cough and sneeze with a tissue or your upper shirt sleeve. Don't touch your face with your unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with sick folks. And clean and disinfect contaminated surfaces such as counters and doorknobs. And then if you have a little one and you notice they're wheezing, breathing quickly, breathing fast, rapid breathing, bluish or purplish tint to the lips or nail beds, that's an emergency. Stop everything and take them to the hospital as soon as possible.
Okay, that's good to know. Hope Tina heard that.
Her grandbabies.
All her babies.
Her grandbabies. Well, thank you all. That was our weekly recap and our debunk. We are now going to move into why I know a lot of you all tuned in tonight, which is to talk about infertility. We as women and men of color grow up in the United States, like I mentioned, with stereotypes about our own group, perhaps related to high rates of teenage pregnancy or being hypersexual or hyperfertile. These are all stereotypes, right? But what is the real deal, the real story when it comes to Black women and women of color and men when it comes to infertility? Tonight, I have an incredible guest. His name is J. Kendall Smalls. For over 25 years, he has been in the field of human embryology and fertility. He's also known as Kenny Smalls, so I'm going to refer to him as Kenny. But he has a Master of Science in Clinical Embryology, making him one of a handful of clinical embryologists in the country who's African American. And he is the director of a practice that specializes in infertility called Global Fertility and Genetics. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Kenny.
Thank you.
So I'm going to jump. There okay. That's fine. That's fine. We can keep going because we can hear you fine. Okay. So let's just start off with, what is a clinical embryologist? I tripped over it at the beginning. So break it down for us. What do you do?
All right. So a clinical embryologist is someone who actually does the IVF procedures. So it means that we're in the lab actually doing the insemination of the oocytes. We retrieve the oocytes at times from the physician who gets them out of the female's body.
Hold on. What is you got to break this down. What is a oocyte? What is IVF?
Okay, no worries.
We are not, just imagine that you're explaining it like you're explaining it to people who are not scientists, because you are.
No worries. So an oocyte is basically it's the eggs that come out of the female's body. It's the eggs. And what we will do, or what the physician does, is that he will put the female on hormones to increase the amount of oocytes through her monthly period. So when you increase the amount of oocytes to be produced within a 10-day period, you then have to extract those oocytes out of the female to then be brought into our laboratory to be fertilized mechanically.
Got it. Okay. So how is infertility defined? What is infertility? How do you know that you need to go see somebody if you're interested in having children? What's the definition of infertility?
Well, it depends on whether or not you're black or white.
Really? Okay.
Because
break that down.
Black women have a higher incidence of infertility than white women.
Okay.
The myth is that we are super fertile, that there is no problem having babies. But for the past 10 or 15 years or so, the rates of Black and Hispanic women having fertility problems has increased, but their levels of getting treatment has decreased. So they know they have a problem, but they're not seeking the help. And sometimes we blame this on just the physicians who treat them. I've been in IVF for over 25 years, and I've had some physicians tell me, Kenny, we don't have any Black and Hispanic patients because there's no problem there. They don't come to seek fertility treatments. And that is so wrong.
Right. So let's back up for a second. So the definition of infertility, is it, I haven't been able to conceive in 3 months, I haven't been able to conceive in 6 months with unprotected sex? What's the definition?
It's usually between 6 to 12 months. Not being pregnant. Some women have different cycles if they're on the pill for an extended amount of time. Sometimes it takes a while before the cycles get regulated all over again. So usually it's unprotected sex between 6 to 12 months.
Got it. All right. I tell you what, we're going to troubleshoot a little bit. If you could sign out and sign back in so we can get your video. And in the meantime, if you could go ahead and sign off and just sign back on, and I'll just explain to everybody what IVF is, which stands for in vitro fertilization. In vitro means in the lab. And of course, fertilization is what Kenny was referring to when he said mechanically, once the eggs are harvested, putting the sperm with the egg. So that's the fertilization part. So in vitro fertilization. There you are. Okay, everybody can see your wonderful face. I think he did that on
purpose. We'll talk about it later. I think he did it on purpose.
Well, we are happy to have you, both your voice and your wonderful face. So what are the numbers? You mentioned that Black women experience the infertility more than white women. What does that look like?
It's probably about a 25 to 30% higher incidence of infertility in Black and Hispanic women compared to whites, compared to Caucasian. So the real problem is that Black and Hispanic usually wait too long to get treatments.
What is too long?
In their 40s.
Wow. Okay.
So whereas I'll have my Caucasian patients usually will come in late 20s if there is a problem with conceiving within about a year or so. And it also depends on the OBGYN and how forward thinking the OBGYN is. Some African American women have been with their OBGYNs for like 25, 30 years. Now, that OBGYN may not be as up to date with the treatments of IVF. And we all know about the myth that African Americans have with science anyway. So the first thing I can remember when I first started doing IVF, and some of the older people in my family were like, "Well, make sure you remember what happened at the Tuskegee Institute with the testing." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not what I do." They're like, "Yeah, that's stuff. We don't know what you're doing. We don't know what you're doing." So IVF, basically, the first IVF baby was born in the 70s.
I remember it.
Yeah, so that was a huge thing. And I got into field in 1990. So in that span of time, the first IVF baby, the first two now have had kids, but ironically enough, those two IVF women who came from IVF both had fertility problems.
Interesting.
So they both had to do IVF. So it's something that we are, as African Americans and basically minorities, we need to be more focused to speak about it, to talk about it, and be more open about it. Now, one of the biggest problems is dealing with the Black man, really, and trying to get him to realize that there may be a problem, that he has to get analysis.
So it might not necessarily be the woman. It might be the man who might be have sperm that are not actually enough, right? Or working in the way that they can actually inseminate or get the egg, fertilize the egg.
Actually,
is that what you're saying?
Yes, actually, since 2007, Black males and Hispanic males, semen analysis has been dropping as compared to white men. The counts have been dropping. And there's a huge study about that from 2007 till now. Their sperm counts are getting lower. That's not to say that they still can't, produce, just as it's getting lower now. But I always tell my African American patients that they come in by themselves. That's the first problem. They come for fertility treatments, they come by themselves. And at our clinic, we don't mind seeing you the first time around, but if you have a partner, if you have a husband, we're not going to go forward with treatment until he's involved.
Okay, so that's really important.
Yeah, he has to come in and do something as simple as a semen analysis. And I'm in part of one of the most machismo fraternities out there, and everybody thinks their prowess is so strong, and that's not the case. That's not the case. So
what are the treatment options when you come in? You may come in the first time by yourself, but definitely, at some point your partner has to be part of the process. What are some of the treatment options available? Ideally, if you come in, under 40, which it sounds like that's ideal to come in before 40.
Well, what we try to do, my minority patients, they would like to get unfortunately, they come in to get the least expensive option. And that's
because money is a factor sometimes, right?
Yeah, yes, they come with the least expensive option. So, but the thing about that is you can't come into IVF treatments and trying to go to cheap way. It's very hard to do that. One of the first ways is using an intrauterine insemination. That's an IUI. That's where the husband will produce a sample, and in the andrology laboratory, they will process a sample to separate the plasma fluid from the semen cells, from the sperm cells, and then the doctor would inject just the free moving sperm cells into the woman. That's the cheapest thing out right now. However, that is the least successful.
Right.
IUIs procedures maybe 17% successful, 20%. Some people get lucky with it, but it's a very, 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 very low success rate.
Okay.
All right. So that's the first option. The second option is doing actual IVF. That's where we're able to take the oocytes out of the body and fertilize them in our laboratory. And then once the embryo grows to day 5, we like to put the embryos back on the 5th day because it has a higher rate of implantation. So we put them back on day 5, one embryo, because thinking that one embryo might split. So we want to put in one embryo.
And when you say implantation, meaning it'll take in the womb and attach to the inside of the womb so it can grow. Okay.
Yes. But there's always a fear that embryo might split. So that's why we always Now in this time and era, we always go for one embryo. About 20 years ago, we were probably trying to put in like 2, maybe sometimes 3. But now that the technology has gotten so much better, and the media preparation for the oocytes and the embryos got so much better, we're comfortable with replacing just one.
Okay.
So
now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but when you go into those higher end pre-genetic implantation tests, where we're able to actually do a biopsy off the embryo and checking for any chromosomal abnormalities as well as sex selection. And there are a lot of our European patients, especially from and even from China, our Asian patients, they want males. So the embryos we're able to check for the sex and chromosomal abnormalities and be able to give them a boy.
Got it. So when a woman or a couple comes in for a consultation, what can they expect? It sounds like, you know, actually, before we even get to that, let me just say, you mentioned that a lot of minority patients often gravitate to the least expensive treatment. So then that brings up the question about insurance, right? Is this something that people have to pay for out of pocket? Because I can see that if the price tag is high, that would discourage a lot of people from seeking treatment.
Actually, it depends on what insurance you have. But to be honest with you, the insurances have been more harmful to the IVF practice than it is for the patient. Just say an IVF procedure may cost $15,000. That maybe charge $15,000 to the patient, but the insurance company would say, "We don't care if you charge $15,000. We'll cover the IVF case, but we'll give you $2,000 because it's in her plan." So it really depends on what insurance you have to see what the cost will be. But insurance, you definitely have to check the insurances of both the female and the male to see who's covering what, because sometimes the insurance companies, and I always tell my other patients like this. The head of insurance companies, when they come to choosing a plan, will they choose a plan that covers IVF if they're a white male with 3 kids already, and they're in charge of HR? They have no effect for IVF. So, or will it be someone who's a woman, head of HR, and has to choose between plans and including the fertility plan? So it always gets back to the leadership in the insurance companies.
Right. Or in the company that you work for with the plan that they choose, that the options for you to choose from where you work. Wow. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, so you check your insurance, you've come in now for a consultation. What are some of the things that they're going to go over with you when you sit down for a consultation?
History, H&P, any previous pregnancies, genetics with the family, and more importantly, we try not to let the guy leave without doing a semen analysis, because that is so important.
And is it pretty frequent that you find that the semen analysis yields information that might point in the direction of maybe there's some issues with fertility on the male side?
Oh yes, all the time. That's probably about 45%, really. Yeah.
Wow, that is quite high. That's actually more than I expected you to say.
Well, what I mean by that, just in the 50-50, the embryos, as you know, is created between the oocyte and the sperm. So it's a 50-50 deal to come to build an embryo. But we found that the males have lower concentrations. African American male and minority have a lower concentration of sperm cells. That's not to say they don't have any sperm cells, just a low concentration of it. So when that is the case, what we do a procedure called ICSI, which is intracytoplasmic sperm injection, where I'm able to pick up one sperm cell, just one, and insert it directly into the oocyte.
Okay.
So as far as that's concerned, motility and counts are non-viable at this point, because all I can do is just pick up one. That's all I need.
Okay. So in other words, what you're saying is sometimes the issue is just the sperm isn't moving right. Maybe there are not enough sperm, but you can correct for that by just selecting one sperm and putting it inside the egg, and things are good to go. All right. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, why do you think this is? I mean, because I can hear the conspiracy theorists out there right now. You know, oh, they're targeting Black men and make sure their sperm count goes down. What are some of the reasons that we see these issues? Both, you mentioned there's higher rates of infertility in Black and Hispanic women, and higher rates of low sperm count in Black and Hispanic men. So what are some of the things that might be accounting for this?
Actually, you know, nothing has been like concrete to say this is the reason why sperm counts are getting lower in men, or reason why Black and Hispanic women have lower fertility success. It's really, you look at the timing of everything, and some conspiracy theorists back when I first started off was thinking that in the 60s, when processed milk started to come out for men, processed milk. So you're not using like those full nutrients you had before. Everything right now is processed. I do believe that processed foods does have a long-term effect on your body. I do believe that 100%.
They do actually. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that processed foods lead to higher rates of chronic disease. But I know that there are a lot of theories just in terms of the added stresses that people of color are under, especially Black men and Black women in this country. One of the reasons why Black women die more in childbirth, sort of on the other end of the spectrum in terms of just the increased stress of living in this country as a person of color causes more wear and tear on the body. And I would imagine that wear and tear is also on the reproductive system as well, because, you know, you can't isolate one part of the body out and not have it undergo the same stresses that the rest of the body is undergoing, from the high cortisol levels, you know, constantly being in a fight or flight situation. And then you mentioned nutrition too. I would imagine nutrition does have something to do with it.
Nutrition, and definitely stress is probably the highest factor for infertility. Stress is probably the highest factor for infertility. When women are trying to seek family growth, and as you mentioned earlier, that it may be a cost issue, the partner doesn't want to spend the kind of money that it takes to do fertility treatments, the stress of being around your sisters, or even dare I say sorors, who are having kids already and you don't. I always talk about the sisters and the mask that you wear. The mask you guys wear of the pain and the stress to just to keep going, and especially if you're a woman of power. You have everything. You have this high title. You have this great husband. You have this great job, but you don't have any kids. And then what happens usually from our own parents, they'll say, well, what are you guys waiting for? When you're going to have some babies? And that is one of the hardest things you can tell a sister, you know, who's going through this thing, who's wearing that mask every day to be successful, to be right, to be looked upon as a great figure, but still have to deal with those kind of stress that someone still can kind of break you down and say, well, what are you waiting for? Not knowing that you're suffering in silence.
Right. And I think there's probably a lot of anxiety or depression associated with infertility for those exact reasons.
And we find that sometimes African-American women and minorities, they will look for fertility treatments on the computer late at night, can't sleep, trying to find a way. And if I could say one thing to your followers, be leery of those IVF clinics who say, pay for 2 IVF cycles, pay for 3 IVF cycles in advance in order to cheapen the cost of IVF. In our clinic, I want to get it done in one shot. I want one time. So you're banking on the success of your clinic to know that you can get this patient pregnant and help her build a family, but not like 2 or 3 times up. They pay you in advance for this kind of money, and then you have nothing. So be leery of those get rich quick schemes with IVF clinics, because there's some of them out there.
Is there a way to find what the success rate is of an IVF clinic?
Yes, it's we all have to report to a government agency called SART, SART, Society of Organization of Assisted Reproductive Technology, SART. So on this SART, you can look up the clinic in your area, put in your zip code, really. You put in your zip code, and then you'll see all the fertility clinics in your area. And what also comes up is the success rates for the clinics, the age level of all the patients that they've seen, their donor egg cycles, and donor egg. I want to touch upon that in a second. The donor egg cycles for success. That's all on SART. We all have to report to the government agency.
Great. That is great to know, because we're here at, excuse me, doctor, we're all about having people navigate the healthcare system, find the best quality care. So everybody who's interested, write that down. SART, put your zip code in, Google SART, I'm assuming.
SART.org. Yep.
SART.org. Okay, great. Wow, I have other questions for you, but I just realized the time. We need to bring Wayne and Bria back in to see if there are any audience questions.
Okay.
I'm sure there are.
Yes, Dr. Mel, there's some questions. You want to start, Bria?
Sure, I'll start us off. So the first question is, when you say successful percentages, do you mean pregnancies or take-home baby rate?
Oh, I always go by take-home baby rate. That's what I base my success on. Getting a woman pregnant, I mean, that's what we set out to do, but the goal is to have a child. It's always a goal. So but the thing about keeping track of the actual births are a little harder to do. SART does a pretty good job of it, but the problem becomes what if a woman does go through IVF after multiple treatments, she gets pregnant, but then she miscarriages. And that has to be reported. But the female may not want to report. She may not want to talk about any of the stuff anymore. So we don't know what happened when the miscarriage took place or anything. So those kind of numbers get skewed. So our success is take-home babies. That's a success.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, that question came from Maria Sindos. She has another question. Your thoughts, wants to know your thoughts on frozen eggs for women. Should all women consider this?
Well, here's a funny thing. I'm trying to say this without getting in trouble. All right. So, donor eggs. Sometimes when our patients are of a certain age and the ovarian reserve is low and they're not producing the amount of oocytes needed for an IVF cycle, we would recommend they get donor eggs. So that basically is getting to a donor agency and picking out someone that has your characteristics. African-American woman, young, in their 20s. You check the age, the education, and all of that. And she'll become a donor for you, donating her eggs for you. So what happens is that she will go through the IVF process. We will extract the oocytes from her. You'll use your husband's sperm to inseminate those same donor eggs, and then we'll implant those embryos into the original Black woman, the female.
The patient. So let me, I just want to be clear about this. When you are born as a woman, you have all the eggs you will ever have. Right. And so as you age, you basically run out of eggs, or those eggs that are there get old. So that's why you were saying earlier, it's best to start IVF before you get to 40, because then the eggs that you're working with are older and then less likely to be able to be successfully fertilized.
So Dr. Mel, Dr. Mel and J. Kendall Smalls, the question was about frozen eggs, though. So maybe I have
well, that's also okay. So with frozen oocytes, right?
Right.
If a woman wants to use frozen oocytes, she could. That's not a problem. But what's been happening is that the new millennials this year, like those younger companies like Google and all those new wave tech companies, those new companies that have young owners, they are actually putting together excellent IVF programs for their staff. So what they're doing is that they're allowing their staff to freeze their oocytes, freeze their eggs. So you have a young person in their 20s, junior executive, you don't want to lose her. So now you're offering her to delay her fertility, her reproductive years by freezing her oocytes now. And there are great programs out there. Some companies that actually use my clinic for all their patients, for all their employees, to freeze their oocytes. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with freezing your oocytes from your 20s and your 30s. When you're in your 40s, we don't recommend it so much because you're delaying your childbearing years for how long. So in your 20s and your 30s, absolutely. If you're not ready to build your family now, absolutely freeze your oocytes. No, there's no problem with it.
Yeah, and I would imagine as more women are choosing perhaps to get married later, for whatever reason, or just to have a baby later, that might be an option. Does insurance cover that too?
Yes. Insurance actually wants you to do that because that's a cheaper process than actual of IVF. They have no problem doing that. Yeah. And as you mentioned, doctor, the women are going to college, usually it's grad school or any kind of professional school after that, and then into their career. And when into the career, it becomes, okay, I want to get ahead. I want to build on my career. So they're delaying their childbearing years. So freezing their oocytes early, allows them to pursue their career, get a strong footing, and then come back for when they're ready to come back.
Gotcha. So that leads us into our next question very perfectly. So you mentioned having insurance and covering it. So in the case that someone doesn't have insurance, how much do these treatments generally cost?
It varies by the clinics, to be honest with you. There's usually a range between about $9,000 to even up to high as $17,000. It depends on which clinic you go to, really. Okay. But there are now fertility finance companies out now. I think one is called Carrot, and the other one, it's just my mind. But there are fertility finance companies out there now that we work with. We work with a company called Carrot that helps with women to pay their fertility services.
Okay.
That's good to know. Okay.
Good to
know. We have a question from a Yolanda Lewis Ragland. She asks, is that per round or total?
Per round or total?
Yeah. Do they pay
meaning per the price that you quoted, is that per each
procedure.
Time?
Procedure, yes,
per procedure? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay. And you mentioned that that's for IVF, not for the IUI that you mentioned before.
IUIs can be
intrauterine insemination.
Between $800 and like $2,000 for an IUI.
Okay. So that is significantly less expensive. So I could see why some people might want to try that first, to see if it works, even though the success rate is lower, like you said.
Right, but if you're in your 40s, I recommend don't go anywhere near an IUI. Go directly to IVF.
Got it.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Bria.
My turn. Awesome. Okay, so question. You mentioned how people of color come in at a later age to receive treatments compared to their white counterparts. Is it just because they don't talk about it, or is it because of other factors, like we talked about cost, racism, access? Like, what other factors play into this delayed care?
We don't talk about it. Bottom line is we don't talk about it. Just to give you an example, you have a white female who calls her insurance company in her 20s and says, you have a black female who calls her insurance and says, oh, do you cover infertility treatments? The insurance company says, no, we don't. The black woman will hang up the phone. My white patients call the insurance company and say, do you cover insurance IVF? They'll say no. The white woman will say, why not? And if you notice that all those insurance companies, they'll say this call is being monitored for quality insurance. So they have to report back every time they weren't able to answer the employees' questions. So that begins to build up and snowball effect until we need to do something about IVF, or we're going to lose these contracts. So for an African American woman who's in a office setting where every time you turn around, they're having baby showers. And she goes to, like I said earlier, to sorority meetings, and everybody's having a baby shower, and they're not talking about it because it's hard to discuss that you're not able to conceive. And it's even harder to discuss with your partner to get them to understand that we, not you or I, but we have a fertility problem.
No, that I hear you, and I would imagine that that's true across the board, regardless of race, for women in general, when they're in a situation where they're not conceiving and there's societal expectations or family expectations that they, that they are getting pregnant. I think it's interesting what you said about, questioning the system. Like, why aren't you doing that? I think everybody should, have that attitude of, well, wow, I'm working. Why is that not a benefit for me? So I think that's definitely a take home point that everybody should question when you call up and say, do you cover something, whether it's IVF or something else? Ask, hey, well, if that's the case, why not? That's really important.
Right. I had one patient one time called their insurance company, and they said they don't cover IVF treatments, but they cover FET, which is a frozen embryo transfer. In order to have IVF, in order to have an FET, you have to have IVF. So you don't pay for the IVF, but you pay for the last part of it. So you see, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But that's their way of saying, oh, we're doing something for an IVF.
Yeah.
Right. So this question comes from Janice Anderson. She says she recently read an article saying Black women who want Black male sperm donors can't find enough of them. Is that the experience at your clinic? And why does it seem Black men are less likely to donate sperm?
Well, you and I can answer that question.
I'm married.
So the first thing is that yeah, there are black male donors out there. There's a few large clinics. One of them is called Cal Cryo, and that's basically like a opening up a phone book and seeing and picking out the male sperm you want. So Cal Cryo does it. Zytec does it. Fairfax down there by you guys also does it. So there are sperm banks, national sperm banks that do have African American donors. So they are there. Now the reason why we don't do it, some of my friends who don't donate, I can speak. They're like, oh, I don't know about that, man. I don't want anybody walking around my kid, whatever. All the mythical stereotype reasons why they shouldn't donate. I get that all the time from my friends.
Okay. So it's more they're playing into the myths and the misinformation.
Yes. There are male Black out there. Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha. I'm on it already. Next question. You talked a little bit about different, races and populations, and you had mentioned something briefly that somebody had commented about the sex selection amongst Asian Americans. They said, I thought sex selection was illegal.
No, it's not.
That's the question.
Yeah. So sex selection is in certain countries, yes, which is the reason why European patients and patients from Asia come to us for sex selection. So yes, it is as dare I say, as part of the Roman Church, all that area there, sex selection, yes, is a taboo. In most European countries, it is a taboo. However, in the US, it is not taboo. And what we're able to do is able to do all the genetic testing. That's why a lot of them come here for the IVF treatments. And even in China, so China used to have a one-child rule for years, only one child. So now they dropped that ban for a few years ago. Now you have these same women who are now in their 40s now wants to come to the US to do IVF because we're able to select male boys for them.
So you mentioned, I'm going to take the privilege of asking the last question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that stress is one of the huge issues in in infertility, leading to infertility. What advice do you give? Does your clinic give patients around managing stress in their lives to be able to maximize the success of the fertility treatments?
The first thing is that acceptance that you and your partner have a problem. Number two, communicate. You have to be able to communicate with your partner. If you can't communicate with your partner, it's a head-on collision. It's a head-on collision. And the third, you got to come to the decision that you want to pursue this together. You have to be able to say, okay, we have a problem. We are going to tackle this, and we will, go on our family building. And also the last thing, which is most important, is acceptance. If the procedures don't work, what do you do then? Because lots of times, as you mentioned, when you're paying for these IVF cycles, and it is very expensive at times, so keep going up and up and more and more and more. At some point, you got to be able to say, you know what, this is it. This is it. And be able to be okay with saying this is it. So a lot of it is looking into yourself to find your peace and to make sure that you find that peace together.
Great points. And I always talk about self-care, which we should all be doing, but I think is also especially true when you're seeking help with infertility, just in terms of getting the right amount of sleep, eating a healthy diet, getting exercise and movement in every day, and then staying well hydrated and always keeping those practices in your life on a daily basis that help you deal with stress, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga or prayer or tai chi, whatever it is, running 10 miles, whatever it is, do it on a daily basis so you can manage your stress. Thank you so much. This was really, really incredible, Kenny. Wonderful guest. Thank you. Great questions from the audience. This was an incredible discussion. And as we close out, I of course have to thank my wonderful producer, Mr. Wayne Bruce, and my co-host, Ms. Bria Good. As we close out, I just want to remind everybody about that study at Howard University. It's still going on. It's not too late. You can get in right now if you so choose. It's about COVID resilience. How have you been coping during the COVID-19 pandemic? What were you doing in order to cope? 2 questionnaires. That's it. 2 surveys. They take a few minutes to fill out, and you will be compensated up to $100 in gift cards for filling them out. So if you have any interest, contact Dana Harvey, and her email is danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. That's Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, H-A-R-V-E-Y, research@gmail.com. So that's it for us this week on Excuse Me, Doctor. Thank you so much for tuning in. You all are a great audience, my Be Health Empowered family. I am going to see you right back here in a week. And until I see you, remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered.
I guess I should thank the Robinsons. They invited me. They still don't know. I hooked up with Dave 3 days ago. He'll start coughing tomorrow. And I bet in 10 days he'll be on a ventilator. Now his wife, she's not vaccinated because she thinks it'll prevent her from being pregnant. But what they don't know is that I can decrease sperm count. Sorry, Dave. Good luck with that.